of Africa. The face and voice of Africa. The story of resurgent and burgeoning Africa is here, only on the Pulse of Africa channel. Pulse of Africa, the face and voice of Africa.
Hello viewers, I'm Ado Masai and welcome to Pulse of Africa News, bringing you the latest updates from across the Africa. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, addressed the inaugural virtual meeting of the ad hoc Committee on AU Institutional Reform. The meeting was convened and chaired by President William Ruto of Kenya, the AU champion for institutional reform. In his remarks, Chairperson Yusuf expressed appreciation to President Ruto for his leadership and commitment in steering the AU's institutional reform agenda. Both leaders reaffirmed Africa's collective resolve to build a stronger, more coherent and people-centered African Union capable of responding effectively to the continent's challenges. President Ruto outlined key objectives, including strengthening institutional efficiency, ensuring sustainable financing, streamlining decision-making, and revitalizing organs such as the Pan-African Parliament and the African Court of Justice. He also highlighted efforts to enhance the AU's governance, peace, and security frameworks to maintain relevance amid shifting global dynamics and rising conflicts. President Ruto announced the extraordinary summit on AU reforms will be held on 26 November 2025 in Luanda, Angola, under the auspices of President João Lourenço. The summit is expected to review progress and chart the next steps towards enhancing the Union's efficiency, governance, and financial sustainability. President John Dramani Mahama has officially launched the Free Tertiary Education Initiative for persons with disabilities in Accra, complementing the broader equity goals of the government's educational reforms. Speaking at the official launch of the program in Accra, the president explained that the initiative marks a significant step towards advancing equality and inclusion in Ghana's education system. He noted that while the National Service Authority had previously administered limited scholarships for persons with disabilities, the new framework would consolidate and expand these efforts under a more coordinated and accessible system. The implementation of this initiative will be led by the revamped Students' Loan Trust Fund, which is now modernized and digitalized to ensure transparency, efficiency, and sustainability, President Mahama said. President Mahama emphasized that the initiative represents a moral and constitutional commitment to fairness and inclusion rather than an act of benevolence. This initiative is not an act of charity, it is an act of justice and equality, he declared. He also mentioned increasing the allocation in the district assemblies common fund from 3 to 5% next year for persons with disabilities. Libya's acting Minister of Oil and Gas, Khalifa Abdul Sadiq, met with Qatar's Minister of State for Energy Affairs, Saad Al-Kabi, on the sidelines of the 27th ministerial meeting of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum held in Doha. The discussions focused on strengthening bilateral cooperation, exchanging expertise, and promoting investment in modern technologies to advance the oil and gas sector. According to a statement by the Libyan Ministry of Oil, both sides also explored opportunities for joint projects and broader collaboration in various energy fields between Libya and Qatar. Libya, home to Africa's largest proven oil reserves, is working to restore and expand its energy production after years of conflict and instability that disrupted operations. The government has been seeking foreign partnerships to upgrade infrastructure, enhance gas utilization, and diversify energy sources.
They shaped history. They inspired generations. They are the notables. Join us as we honor Africa's greatest minds and trailblazers, the notables, celebrating Africa's icons.
Today, we delve into the life of a man whose courage didn't just change his own nation, but inspired an entire continent. His name was Ahmed Sékou Touré.
Nous préférons la pauvreté dans la liberté à la richesse dans l'esclavage.
Touré was inspired by these moments and forged connections with fellow African leaders. He studied the strategies of liberation across the continent.
A moving short film titled At the End of the Rainbow is empowering rural schoolgirls in Zimbabwe to challenge child marriage and claim their rights. The 17-minute film, produced by Boostop TV with support from Amnesty International Zimbabwe, was screened in Mutare during the commemoration of the International Day of the Girl Child. The event, themed Girls in Conflict, brought about 75 girls from Nyangundi and Guririndi secondary schools in Manicaland province. The film tells the story of Onai, a young girl whose life takes a tragic turn after being sexually abused by her school head, forced into marriage, and later suffering from an obstetric fistula during childbirth. The story deeply resonated with the young audience, sparking emotional reactions and open discussions about reproductive health, child abuse, and early marriage. Many girls expressed that the film had changed their perceptions of their rights and future. Amnesty International Zimbabwe's campaigns coordinator, Rose Muzerengi, said the film aims to raise awareness about the link between child and sexual abuse, child marriage, and reproductive health issues such as obstetric fistula. Girls in rural areas remain the most vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. This film calls for prevention and accountability, she said. Despite ongoing awareness efforts, child marriage remains widespread in Zimbabwe, driven by poverty and cultural practices. Muzerengi urged authorities to fully implement the Child Protection Act signed by President Emerson Mnangagwa last year to ensure the perpetrators of child abuse and forced marriage are held accountable. Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo are moving forward with efforts to boost small-scale cross-border trade, holding a meeting in Bujumbura to review progress on reopening the Buganda, Nyamoma, and Mbarampo-Rubenga border posts. The discussions aim to finalize a roadmap for completing remaining tasks, including the construction of temporary administrative offices, provision of boats for crossing the Rusizi River ahead of bridge construction, and harmonization of migration documents. A joint communique between the two governments is also expected to formalize the process. Dr. Christopher Onyango, Director of Trade and Customs at the COMESA Secretariat, commended both countries for their commitment to strengthening small-scale cross-border trade, highlighting the initiative's potential to generate economic, social, and political benefits. Supported by the World Bank under the Great Lakes Trade Facilitation and Integration Project, the border reopening is expected to restore livelihoods, promote regional stability, and enhance public confidence in security and health measures across the Great Lakes region. The border closures between Burundi and the DRC have long hindered small-scale traders who rely on cross-border commerce for their livelihoods. Reopening these posts is part of broader regional efforts under COMESA and the Great Lakes Trade Facilitation and Integration Project to enhance trade, reduce barriers, and promote economic integration. The Ethiopian Minerals Corporation, AMC, and Sunbird Bioenergy have signed a memorandum of understanding to advance Ethiopia's renewable energy and biofuel production, supporting the country's green economic transformation agenda. AMC CEO Tedros Getachew described the partnership as a strategic collaboration for sustainable growth, energy independence, and environmental resilience. The initiative will develop an integrated bioenergy project producing bioethanol from cassava, with plans to expand into sustainable aviation fuel, potentially producing 530,000 million liters per year by 2028 up to 2029. Sunbird Bioenergy Africa CEO Richard Bennett said his company is the largest renewable fuel producer across Africa and play a key role in driving the continent's net zero energy transition. The project also aligns with Ethiopia's national strategy to responsibly harness natural resources, promote low-carbon growth, and modernize the aviation and transport sectors. Officials from the Ministry of Transport and Logistics and Ethiopian Airlines emphasized the collaboration's role in combining economic growth, environmental sustainability, and industry development. The agreement came at a pivotal time as Ethiopia advances its national strategy to responsibly harness its natural resources and transition to a low-carbon economy. Now to business news. China's CMOC Group will spend $1.08 billion to expand its KFM copper mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo to add about 100,000 metric tons of output per year, as said on Friday. It will launch the second phase of its KFM project in 2027. The first phase of KFM reached full capacity in 2023. The investment comes as copper supplies face possible shortage amid mine worldwide disruptions, including the suspension of Freeport's flagship Grasberg project in Indonesia. CMOC owns 71.25% of KFM through its Hong Kong-based subsidiary and also operates the Tenke Fungurume mine in Congo. Both mines are key suppliers of copper and cobalt, metals key for energy transition. CMOC said the KFM expansion will strengthen its position in the global market, but warned of possible risks from price swings and the DRC's political and economic uncertainty. Next, let's check the current weather forecast. That's all from Pulse of Africa News. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more stories that matter to Africa and beyond.
This is Editorial from Pulse of Africa, the voice and face of Africa.
South Africa must end G20 presidency emphatically. In November, South Africa will host the G20 summit that will consummate the Rainbow Nations presidency of the world's most influential grouping. Alongside the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors will assemble to take stock of the year's performances and chart out the future of multilateral financing. Few, if any, contend South Africa's performances in terms of meeting the deliverables it set out to achieve at the start of its G20 presidency as the first African country to assume the role, a prestigious term with far-reaching ramifications. Already, South African officials are making what they deem to be a list of achievements to count on a global scale. They take pride in declaring that their country, during its presidency, got the G20 members to have endorsed an Africa Engagement Framework (AEF) that they say will keep the continent's concerns firmly on the finance track agenda towards a focused, structured engagement from 2026 to 2030. The AEF will focus on 5 priority areas, including fiscal and macroeconomic challenges, and institutional reforms to enhance governance, developing regional infrastructure to facilitate the African Continental Free Trade Area, reducing the high cost of capital, and strengthening the role of private finance, as well as enhancing the role of international financial institutions and facilitating growth and development on the continent. The South Africa officials also take pride in the fact that their country, using its G20 presidency to make a move to addressing debt sustainability. The agreement between G20 finance ministers on a ministerial declaration on debt sustainability is a landmark achievement, writes Enoch Godongwana, the South African Minister of Finance, on the Daily Maverick, a South African publication. Many developing countries face high borrowing costs, constraining their ability to address poverty and inequality and invest in growth and development. This is particularly challenging for low-income countries in Africa, where interest payments on external debt have more than doubled over the past decade. While the foregoing cannot be overstated, it is well to draw attention to the fact that over half of Africa's 55 countries spend more on servicing debt than on education or health. According to the African Debt Outlook dated February 2025, Egypt, South Africa and Angola have the highest external debt in Africa, followed by Morocco and Sudan. Also Nigeria, Kenya, Tunisia, Ethiopia and Ghana are cited as having high external debt or debt distress risk. Several other nations face significant debt challenges, with some classified as having a high risk of debt distress, including Burundi, Cameroon and Central African Republic, among others. While debt generally has become a challenge facing Africa as shown briefly above, it is made worse by the high cost of debt servicing, which is not uniform across borrowers. Non-African ratings agencies determine risk levels for African borrowers. As of late, the African Union raised the issue with the heads of state and government, recognizing the urgent need to have Africa Inc. credit agencies with firm grasp on African local economic realities, prospects and challenges. The traditional external ones, it has been suspected, more often than not, can go awry in their assessments. This aspect of debt sustainability and need to address Africa's debt through debt relief and restructuring has been the overarching concerns expressed by 107 civil society and global debt justice organizations, addressing a hard-hitting letter to the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, ahead of the upcoming G20 summit in Johannesburg. The letter said current debt arrangements were inadequate, restructuring processes were too slow, debt reductions were too shallow, and the sharing of responsibility between public and private creditors deeply unequal. African countries are charged much higher interest rates than countries in other regions with comparable credit ratings and macroeconomic indicators. It cited a UNDP report as having revealed that the resulting African premier costs African countries US dollars 74.5 billion per year in excess interest payments, expressing also concern over what it described as a lack of demonstrable progress in resolving these issues during the year 2025. In a 7-point recommendation, the CAOs called for a new debt architecture, radical reform to debt restructuring processes, establishment of an African credit rating agency, as well as agreement on the sale of IMF gold reserves to finance a debt relief fund, and acknowledgement to the urgent need for debt relief. The calls clearly align with the African Union's call for reform of the international financial architecture, including the establishment of a fairer and more transparent system of debt restructurings. South Africa must therefore play a leading role during the upcoming G20 summit with a view to getting something significantly tangible out of it. Then the Rainbow Nation will have come full circle in its achievements, emphatically ending its 2025 G20 presidency and passing the baton on to the next.
This is Editorial from Pulse of Africa, the voice and face of Africa.